Hi, everybody. This is Paul Crouse again, and we're on the Paul Crouse Show here on the Star Nation's not radio network, talk show network.
Media
Anyway,
network.
this is Neshi. This is Neshi. She's the leader, the boss, the big kahuna. Well, you can't say that anymore.
I'm the leader of the pack. How's that?
She's the leader of the pack. She's the alpha, the alpha woman. Hi, Neshi. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's Monday here.
It's Monday. Wait, you're so low. It's Monday. It isn't. It's Tuesday. It is on this side of the planet. Hi, I'm Paul Crouse. I'm in Kyoto, Japan. Neshi, where are you?
I'm in Wisconsin.
Whereabouts in Wisconsin?
It's in the upper Midwest. It's between Minnesota and Michigan.
No, where in Wisconsin?
Oh, we're in Wisconsin. I'm in the northwestern part of the state. And
Okay.
It's about where I live is about an hour east of the Mississippi River.
Okay, I used to live in that direction when I went to school in La Crosse and then later in Madison. And I actually hitchhiked past. You're by Toma there, yeah?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I hitchhiked past there once.
Yeah. Where were the
and they didn't leave my body in a ditch somewhere, so it was okay.
It's always good that way, right?
Yeah. We just had the little sign that said Madison. Hi, everybody. Rob Candle said, "Did she die in a motorcycle app?" That is not a happy song. Don't know what that. I'm missing something there, but into the reference. I will try to be reading the comments a lot more this this show. By the way, our subject today is, so firstly, a quick introduction. Hi, my name is Paul Crouse. I'm a life coach based here in Kyoto, Japan. I help people who want to make life changes. So you can contact me at my website, which is paulcrouse.com. That's Crouse with a C, Crouse. And Neshi, could you introduce yourself? It looks like you're texting there.
I'm sharing out the show.
You're sharing out the show.
Yes, I am. I'm liking.
No, you're not just being a teenager, like.
No, I'm not. I was actually working on your behalf. I was sharing.
Thank you for working on my behalf.
Yes, I'm Yvette Neshi Lokotz, and I am the steward. Some people would say the CEO. I'm not real comfortable with that title because I don't see me as a CEO as much as a steward of Star Nation's organization, LLC, and we are a multimedia company, and we cover magazine, the live stream shows, and the Academy, which is both online and in-person classes, and we're busy.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
That's where I'm broadcasting from right now, is Star Nation's Academy right now.
Okay, and so we could call you have you ever watched Game of Thrones?
Once or twice.
Oh, Queen of the North, leader of. We could give you a title.
Ew.
The mother of dragons, the mother of.
Well, don't go there.
Okay, fair enough. So, how you doing today, Neshi?
I'm doing really well. Paul and I, my husband Paul, I have a lot of Pauls in my life. Yes, I do. All of them are Gemini. What was it?
Let's not get that mixed up.
No. Well, okay. Let me finish this. My husband Paul and I, we had a 4-day weekend. Doesn't happen very often because, I have my mom here with us. She's 99. And to get care to come in to take over for the primary care is kind of far between. And so 2 of my brothers showed up for the weekend to take over. And so Paul and I got away for the weekend. Yay. We took our puppy George with us. George. He's 5 months old. And he was at a kennel for one night. And I feel great. Sleep does wonders.
Actually, I read there was a story going across some Facebook feed, but it was a pretty good one. It was like, is your depression actually just lack of sleep? No, really, it's a big. I mean, we need sleep. I mean, I live in Japan, which is like this absolute sleep deprived country. If I can get 6 hours of sleep, that's like, and I need 8. So if I can get 6 hours, that's like, wow, you're lazy or something. I mean, it's really hard just to get stuff done. I mean, to get to bed and then get up and.
Yeah. Yeah. I average about 5 or 6 hours a night about, and I am too one of those people that need 8. And so, although I think my body is adjusting to it after 7 years. So.
Okay. I can understand that. Yeah. Mine never adjusted to it. It's like, yep, sleep now. So, okay. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And you got snow there in Western
We have
Wisconsin?
some. We have some. We don't have much left on the ground because the last couple of days we've had like 35 to 40 degrees here, which is like balmy tropical weather for us this time of year.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, we have maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 inches on the ground.
Okay.
It hasn't snowed in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
4 or 5 inches. That's, I'd say, 10, 12 centimeters. Okay.
Yeah. And it's because of because it's gotten warm and gotten cold, gotten warm. It's kind of crystallized, crunchy. It's not one that you want to make snowballs with.
Okay.
You might be able to do some snow angels in it, but it's kind of crunchy snow.
And have you done a snow angel recently?
Not recently. Not since last year.
Okay, I'm going to try to adjust my brightness here. Okay, so today our subject is there is no one way. So let me take our names down. So I know everything, right? Well, as I wrote in a blog post, it's sort of like it seems to be the philosophy of nowadays that I'm right, you suck.
Mm-hmm.
Does that attitude seem to be working in your part of the world too?
Yeah, but mostly around politics, really.
Okay.
And it's gotten to the point where you can't even really discuss much because it's so divisive. I mean, you can literally see the dividing line.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really can't have I'd like to just sit down and talk about it and see, where their thoughts and stuff. I find it fascinating. Doesn't mean that they're going to change, my beliefs. It doesn't mean that I'm trying to change their beliefs. I just find it fascinating to sit down and have a discussion. But I find it more and more often that that's not the case, that literally they say, they will start using derogatory things and name calling and like, wait.
Okay, no, so yeah, okay. Let's talk about that a second.
Okay.
Why do you, I mean, I have my opinion about this. Why do you think that is, the name calling thing? And it happened before the current American president became.
That's true, but I think it's gotten more prevalent since then.
Okay, because he engages in that, which never really happened before. I mean, they would attack their rivals, but I mean, or did it?
Yeah, and well, I don't think it happened as much in public, like, at a microphone kind of situation or on Twitter.
Yeah, partially because maybe Twitter didn't really exist it's only been out a few years, right?
Well, I would say at least, it's not been, I don't think it's been 10 years.
Right.
I think that it's much more out in the public, whereas I think that politicians really kept their personal opinions more in closed quarters.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough.
Not so much public.
No,
I'm not saying they didn't have them. I'm just saying that it wasn't out there for everybody.
Well, yeah, yes, there was a wee bit of decorum. Although, did you ever see there was a great HBO series once called John Adams? Did you ever see this? Paul Giamatti played John Adams. John Adams is the second American president. He was one of the so-called founding fathers. He was one of the people that helped the Americans kick out the British.
Yeah.
And he actually was the lawyer for the Boston Massacre. He successfully defended the British soldiers who shot at American. There was basically a mob harassing these British soldiers who were protecting something, and to defend themselves, they shot into the crowd, and John Adams actually defended them.
Mhm.
It's actually a really good show because it shows. I mean, a lot of these guys that that like the Boston Tea Party people, a lot of them, like his friend showed his cousin Sam Adams is basically being a thug. You know, at one point though, when he's president, he had this big rivalry with Thomas Jefferson, and he's sitting there, he's reading some papers, chomping on a cigar, and his wife Abigail is reading the newspaper, and they're using all of these horrible names about him. And he's a hermaphroditical, blah 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 blah, neither male nor female, can't neither, blah 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 blah. And she's getting really, really, really angry about it, and he's just like, yeah, well, there's nothing to do about it.
So maybe we haven't gotten as far down the road as we think.
Now, well, that's part of the thing. Although, is that people are people, right? Whether through time and space, yes, we have culture and times have changed, but human beings are basically human beings, and so
Yeah.
we all have our strengths and our weaknesses and our and similar things like ideologies and dogma. I mean, so we can think about, especially in times of great change. I mean, things like, for example, the French Revolution. There was a lot, with dogma and so forth, we can justify dragging thousands of people into the town square and chopping their heads off with a guillotine yay! I mean, things needed to change, but is that where we want to go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when you bring that up, what comes to my mind, being Native American, becoming that we have more things that are more recent in the United States that have happened, and we talk about the forced marches, right, from the Trail of Tears with the Cherokee from North Carolina to Oklahoma, right? And the same thing happened to the people that I'm enrolled with, my people, which is the Potawatomi Nation. Ours was called the Trail of Death. More than half of the people died being forced from Michigan, Wisconsin, Upper Indiana, Illinois to Kansas.
Okay.
And so that's much more recent. That was like in the 1800s. Okay. And so, yeah, and why? Because others wanted the land.
Sure.
Our ancestral land. And we got moved several times because the land became more valuable.
Sure.
And so we got moved again, right?
Sure.
And yeah, and so there was this belief around of relocation at that time. And John Adams, wait a minute, get my presidents right here. I know it was Adams.
John Quincy Adams?
Yes. Yeah.
A little bit later.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. He was no friend of the indigenous people, that's for sure.
Well, no, and then like Andrew Jackson either. Well, we can go down the list.
Lincoln, or we could name.
Right. The whole Manifest Destiny. We're gonna have a destiny to take this land. Oh, you just guys happen to be in the way. So we have things like propaganda and in making it easier to kill people of a different color because we want their land or we want their oil
or the natural resources. Yeah.
Right. So
generation after generation.
I mean, but this is this is not anything new and not anything specific to the United States. The history of the New World. Well, have you ever read the book? Such spirituality here. Well, but who cares? Have you ever read the People's History of the United States?
No, I haven't.
It's this guy named Howard Zinn, and he's on the left, and very clearly so, but basically he talks about, well, usually when you read histories, it's about the top 1%, the people that run the show. Well, he goes, this is the 99 or the 98%, whatever. And he talked about the very beginning of the book. He talks about Columbus, and he goes, all you have to do is we can just take stuff right from his dictionary. He goes, oh, this island, Hispaniola, which is now Dominican Republic and Haiti.
Right.
The people are really nice and gentle and lovely, perfect for making slaves. And then they ended up, enslaving and slaughtering those folks until they ran out of them, and then they had to import some from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting back to it's easy to jump into this political stuff, and it's easy to, but what I want to talk about is this idea of there's no one way,
right?
That there's no, and since we typically talk about spiritual stuff here on Star Nations, I want to bring it back to that. So I'm sure we've met people that, or have relatives, or who are strongly believers in one specific religion or another, right?
Right.
And you can, and 2 clicks on the internet, and we can find people that will tell you that there's only Jesus is the only way, or Allah is the only way, or Krishna is the only way. You have to do it this way, or Buddha is the only way. This kind of Buddha is the only way. Blah 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 blah. And how do I say this? It's really easy to get cynical about that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, of course, we live in countries that have freedom of religion. Not everybody does. All right. Not everybody has the choice. No, but people that live in places that don't have a choice. They have to follow. They have to, place like Afghanistan or say Saudi Arabia. They have no choice. You have to be the local religion.
Right.
It's the law, and you'll be severely punished if you're not.
Right.
Okay. So we have this choice, and I think that's a good thing, that people have the choice to have their own religious beliefs or not, or not have none at all. Mm-hmm. Right. That's also a choice to. So I'm starting with, for trying to, has a baseline. It's good to have freedom of choice. Yes.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because we were given a gift called free will, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're not able to practice our free will, we get cranky as 2-legged humans. Doesn't matter where you're from, know.
Exactly.
Right. And I was just thinking, when you were talking about the freedom and freedom of choice and that sort of thing. It wasn't until 1974 that most Native Americans across the United States could legally practice their religion.
Which
1974.
Yeah, that seems. I mean, that's not what we were taught in school.
That's exactly right.
When I was 10 years old.
Right, and so it was illegal for us to practice, like for my grandfather, the dream drum, the big drum. That's why they held their ceremonies out in the middle of nowhere, and you had to hike in for them, kind of thing. That's one of the reasons why, is because it was harder for people to find them when they were doing their ceremonies. And so when we're talking about freedom of choice and free will, when it comes to our spirituality, I think that sometimes that's why we kind of hold things close to the chest, that we don't always, especially from my point of view, from Native Americans, and not all of them, but those who practice the traditional religions most certainly do. That's why when it comes to New Agey stuff, that's why some Native Americans, you'll see them kind of step back a few steps. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we're not supposed to talk about that in public. We're not supposed to hear about that in public, and they get kind of hot under the collar around people like me, who tend to talk about that stuff with all people. It doesn't matter to me,
Well, there was Americans actually, how do I say this? Most Americans, from my experience, I haven't lived there in a long time, but most people in like the workplace or whatever, pretty much shy away from talking about religion or politics.
Yes.
Because can be incendiary, and it's, in the workplace, A, it's inappropriate, but B, people just kind of want to have my beliefs, your beliefs. Really, what does it have to do with work?
Yeah. Well, I think that was true for a certain amount of people and at a certain time.
Okay.
I think that there's been more openness about the differerences lately, anyway. I would say since probably 2008 or so.
You mean people in public, like in a place like the work would be?
I worked
Really?
for state government.
Okay.
Okay. And so there were certain things you couldn't talk about.
Sure.
Religion being one of them because of separation of church and state. But people were talking all the time in their cubicles about, the Democrats versus the Republicans, because we had at the time an outgoing Republican governor, an incoming Democrat governor. And yeah, people were still talking about in their cubicles.
Okay.
And having sometimes having heated discussions about it.
Well, I mean, because it also, when state government worker, it does kind of it kind of influences what you're doing, right? I mean,
exactly.
Especially if they're like, cutting your job or making you so you can't be in a union or.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, make it a little interesting and throw in the ingredient of a closed shop union, and it gets very interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
So. Moving it back to, it's easy to go to politics, and I like talking about politics, but let me
bring it back around.
Speaking of politics,
yeah,
quite a few years ago, Bill Clinton came to speak here in Kyoto, and he was going around collecting money for his foundation, which was doing HIV AIDS awareness and treatment facilities in developing countries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it was very interesting because I was really lucky to get tickets to go see him. And Bill, whatever you think about him, his politics, Bill has charisma. And I've actually never seen any other human being quite like him before. He walked into the room, and the room actually changed. It was a big room, and he just it's one of those things you can't put your finger on it, but it's just like, wow.
Yeah, he's got charisma. That's for sure.
That charisma thing is amazing. And I also think there was other stuff in the room with him.
Okay.
So
yeah.
At the end of the speech, and this is quite a few, maybe more than 10 years ago, he was talking about the biggest threat, he said, to the world at the time was, sorry, my lighting is changing because it's going sunny and not sunny out there, was the rise of fundamentalism. He goes, I don't mean fundamentalist religion, although that it can be. There's sort of the idea that people are becoming this sort of fundamentalist mindset where there's a very rigid belief system, and you have to agree with it. And if you don't agree with it, you're evil. Whoever doesn't agree with you is evil.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you can't have. So you end up with, and it's actually come to pass where you end up with these sharp divides where there's no middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
And he's ultimately a pragmatist. He goes, when in government, it's like you have a problem. You look at the problem in front of you. You do your best to solve that problem as best you can,
mm-hmm.
and then move on to the next thing. But in a democracy, you can't please everybody. Basically, the best solution to the problem is everybody's a little bit pissed off because you can't get everything you want because it's a democracy. There's people have different needs and wants and desires, and we're trying to accommodate pretty much everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's called compromise.
Yes.
And there's a time and a place to not have compromise, but basically in a democracy, you got to have a compromise because if you don't, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
so, and I think it was totally true, not just in the political realm, but also like I mean, I've come across spiritual people who are very, very rigid in their views. My way is the only way. Why? Because I have ego, and this is where our egoic mind wants to be, I'm right. And
that's right.
But also in the fact that maybe this is the way they learned, and maybe a specific system, it works. in that specific system. So, for example, if you do a certain kind of meditation and you have success with this meditation, it's easy to believe that, well, this is the only kind of since I was successful with this, this is the only way that it works.
Right.
As opposed to, well, maybe other ways work too, but
there is something to be said about that middle path, right? And that's, the balance, right? And this is just my 2 cents, okay? Is that when I find that people are pretty adamant that this is the only way, that they don't appreciate the many paths terminology up the mountain, many times it is based in ego. Most times it is. And there's also a sense of fear in that as well, because it's about control. That if they don't control that, something bad could happen. And so there's this underlying fear with it. And nobody trying to have a conversation about this with somebody who has that belief, that ideology of this is the only path. They don't want to talk about the fear. They don't. Sure. It's not there, And
so, what would be the fear?
Well, I think it's the losing control of the situation, losing control over, if they have students, losing control over the students. I think it's about control.
Okay, control. And so control, there's a power element of that, right?
Yes, right. Yeah. Which goes back to the ego thing.
So when I was younger, I was a member of a group, which name I won't talk about because I don't want to hassle with their lawyers. One day maybe, but it's not worth my time.
Yes.
My time and money.
Yeah.
But this group was cult-ish. And I actually learned a lot about cults from this experience. And that cultishness actually is a spectrum, like a lot of things. There's varieties of control. And but they were very, very adamant about there's no discussion about this is what it is. And any time that you were like, wait a minute, there's something here that's not right. They would shut down the conversation right away, and then they would ostracize you from the group. And one of the so for example, one of the symptoms, shall we say, of a cult organization is usually they have a charismatic leader, and usually that charismatic leader, yes, you go into their house and everybody's got the picture of that charismatic leader on the wall, and they talk about this charismatic leader in a godlike fashion. Yep. And infallible. More infallible than the Pope, actually. Yeah. And, no, really. And then people have this, like, whatever he's this, they get this, this cult of personality where it says, like Kim Jong-un or whatever, that it has, that like they're always right and everything. And anytime you try to challenge things, they'll ostracize you, they'll criticize you. And again, it's all about control. It's about mind control, actually. So I'm usually and one of the things they also do with this cultish stuff is they work on your vocabulary. There's a very specific words that they want you to use. Oh. And part of that is it separates you from everybody else. And this is one of the things they want to do is to keep you separate. But they also, because that's a way of controlling your mind. And it's also a way of, we have this of figuring out who's in the group and who is out of the group. Yes. So I'm usually pretty, how do I say this? I'm very suspicious of people that are trying to control my vocabulary. Now, I understand we want to have language that isn't overtly offensive to people, especially because of their race, ethnicity, sexual preferences, and so on. But when it gets a little too, let me speak the way that I speak because this is my dialect. Okay, right. I'm not. Okay, there's a certain amount of language that's like over here. We shouldn't use that. But when they're expanding it, it becomes this, you're trying to control the way that I think. Yeah. And right. As a free thinker,
and ultimately the way you feel. Your
Sure.
emotion.
But, yeah, of course.
And the things that they use, and you named a couple of them, they use shame, public shaming. They use when they ostracize, it's putting you in a position of not belonging, and everybody wants a sense of belonging, right? And so they really do target those more base fears that almost everybody has or had at one time. And and many times it what it does is it chips away at your self confidence. And so,
Sure. Because you're giving that power, it's disempowering because you're giving your power away to the group or to the leader or to the and then you get the really extreme example, like what was the Jonestown people who committed mass suicide, and it was in the 70s, and I think it was in northern South America, and that kind of, because that's kind of crazy. And now it's understandable in our modern world where we live in a time of rapidly accelerating change. Change happens in amazing speed. All right. Snap of the finger. I mean, it's just like unbelievably fast.
Yeah.
Because to talk about like with Twitter, like I looked up the other day, I forgot the date it was, but Facebook hasn't been around actually that long.
1996.
Right. So it's like, I mean, but I mean, it's like how much this is controlled has influenced our lives, right?
Yeah.
So with the world changing so quickly, people are. What used to be solid ground before has become quicksand, or it's disappeared. And so people are looking for something really solid. I want to understand this. I want to understand the way the world is. So some leader comes up, whether they're a spiritual leader or political leader or whatever, and then they say, well, this is the way it is. And then they come up with a very simple, easy to understand view of the world. It's either black or white. You're with us or you're not with us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's like, well, wait a minute. The world isn't simple.
No.
Especially, I mean, how many people do you know that are black and white?
None.
Right? None. So as soon as you put people into the mix, one person into the mix, it becomes complicated.
Right.
So,
right.
Put 7 billion people into the mix, it gets really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But people want to have this. And so, especially if you get a person who's charismatic, whether it's a spiritual leader or a political leader, that charisma, people get entranced by it. I actually think, like, I'm not so keen on gurus. Now, I understand that gurus come specifically from India, and there was a cultural reason in the Hindu religion and so on and so forth. But I'm really not into gurus because it's really easy for people this power becomes very strong. They stand out in front of 100 people, even 10 people, and they tell people stuff.
Yeah.
And then, like, everybody, they believe what I say. Oh my God.
The word guru, was used to be more of a general term. We took it from a very specific group of people and a specific belief system, and kind of spread it across the world. In when the New Age came into being, right? And the same thing I think happened with the word shaman.
Okay.
Because, and it's very similar. It doesn't. Many people think that it came from the United States, from Native America, and it didn't. It didn't. It came from the Laplanders. It came from the Sami people. That's their language. Okay. Yeah, and it actually translated to English loosely means one who travels in the dark. Okay. And so we're using that word as well as guru. It's come to be used pervasively, I think. It's almost like Kleenex. People think like Kleenex is tissue, and then tissue is just, Kleenex is a brand.
Yeah, well, it's like Coca-Cola. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I know in Japan, if you say Kleenex, nobody understands it because they have but they have tissue.
Yeah, or here in Wisconsin, when you say a pop, nobody knows what you're talking about. If you say soda, hand me a soda, then everybody knows what you're talking about.
Unless you're in Milwaukee, then it's the other way around.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, that's Milwaukee.
Bubbler and fountain, I think.
So anyway,
Where people were living by the words that they used.
yeah. But how do we, as spiritually awoken people, that we're actually living our lives, knowing and understanding that we're spiritual beings? How do we make our way through this as part of our experience here? Because it is part of the earth experience.
Yep, that's the question here, isn't it? Well, before I answer that, there are benefits in finding a system that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, for example, have you ever heard of Vipassana meditation?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Vipassana is a broad word. It's like saying Zen. Okay. But there's an organization by a guy named Goenka-ji. It was a Burmese man who went to India, and he started this organization where he taught his style of Vipassana meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone to the Vipassana Center 3 times.
Yep.
10-day meditation.
You've written about it 3 times.
Huh?
You've written about it 3 times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They so I've gone to the centers, 10-day meditation retreats for 10 days, 9 days of silence. It's really difficult. But they have at the Vipassana Center, it's like, this is our group and this is the rules. So this is what we're teaching, and so you got to follow the rules. You don't follow the rules, thank you very much, but you're bothering the other people, so please leave. And that's fair enough. Now, this group, I found out, so it's 10-day retreat, and it also is possible you could go to 10 days someplace and get brainwashed.
Yeah.
And this place isn't that way. They have their own rules, and they have their own leader, but this is the techniques they teach. Mm-hmm. And so fair enough, their house, their rules, okay? Yeah. And it's also good, there's a benefit to following this specific methodology so that you learn it correctly. Mm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fair enough. Now, I've chosen in my life not to follow that specific path, so therefore I don't. And in this group, they weren't people, how shall I say, hounding you have to join, you have to stay in the group, blah, 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 blah. People were like, oh, great, thanks, fine. This is what you did. Right. That's so for me, but I also knew that was a safe group to go into because of other people that I know and trust have said that this was a good experience, and you're not going to come out like a zombie.
Okay.
Because I also do know here in Japan, they have companies that will put you on these retreats where they actually do brainwash people in work. It's crazy. Yeah. The people I know, one person in particular was quite messed up by this experience. She wasn't experienced. She went to the training seminars, and suddenly they're like, it's like you're singing the praises of Kim Jong-un, and it's the company president, and they repeat all these songs, and they have all these techniques that cults use.
Oh my goodness.
So that you will work without complaining and work for free overtime. So these things. So again, what is this balance of understanding when you walk in the door? Is this something that's good for me, or is it? How do you know? So like a lot of stuff in life, from my experience, it was trial and error. I'm glad when I was younger, when I figured out the group that I was with was a cult, it freaked me out, and I was really angry. But now I researched about it, and I learned that now I know when I go into. So for me, a big red flag when someone's telling you that this is the only way and I know everything, it's either they're lying or deluded. Oh, yeah. And I still don't know which one is worse, someone lying or someone being deluded. I go back and forth on that one because the universe is so amazing. How can you put it all in this little box? The little box can be useful for helping us learn things, but realizing that the box is just illusionary.
Well, and I think it goes back. We talk a lot about this at Star Nations, is about discerning. Mm-hmm. Discerning for yourself if it resonates with you or not. And what does that mean? How does it feel? Because our bodies are our GPS system. Mm-hmm. And so when we're paying attention to how we're feeling in our bodies, we can feel when somebody lies to us. We can. Okay. We can feel when something's not right with this picture. You might not know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels off. It feels not quite right. Listen to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
some people
I'm
are
getting a little echo here a second, so it's just a moment. Yeah. Well, but okay. But in
yeah,
psychology, though, too, we have to. There's this whole. If Frances was here, I could ask her this question.
yeah,
Well, because no, when you're like, I used to be a drunk, and there were certain elements of. I mean, my ego wasn't comfortable with hearing the truth, so I would have physical reactions hearing the truth because my ego, my brain wants to keep into that same. I want to stay an addict. My
yeah,
brain is like, my body was like wants to stay an addict. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
judging again, all of this. So we're again, it's part of this is discernment and how do I know that these feelings I have are they legitimate feelings like there's something wrong or is it just me trying to stay within my belief system? Because I mean,
yeah,
if you can really, I mean, people can get really physically ill when they find out that their belief system, something that they believe their entire life, and they're presented with something that shows that it's absolutely wrong, their
right.
ego just like crashes. And
Yeah, and that could happen. That really could happen, especially when it's kind of sprung on you. You know,
sure.
although I do daily live streams, right, based on the card draws, divination cards that I draw in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that we've been talking a lot about has been our gifts that we came in with and using them. But we've also really been talking about facing our greatest fear, because on the other side of that, when you face it and you release it or heal from it, is your greatest desires. It's on the other side of that. Well, what that led to was taking a look at our belief systems and what supports you, and what doesn't. And sometimes when you're looking at your beliefs, is that are you going to release the entire belief, or are there bits and pieces of that belief that still support you?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to, even if you just take one, because usually the major one is the one that kind of comes up pretty easily. And if you take a look at that and you do your own discerning and your own work on it, of what is really supporting you and what is a block and what has never felt right to you, and releasing that piece. Nobody says you have to release the whole thing, but it takes time. It takes time to go through it and really pay some attention to that. And you're right. When all of a sudden one day you go, oh my God, I believed that my entire life, and it's never supported me. Not really. In fact, it's always been kind of a block, no matter what that belief is. So when we do it ourselves, there's power to that.
Sure.
When we do it ourselves, when it's sprung on you, yes, I think that could throw you into a healing crisis.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, a lot of our beliefs too are subconscious and, come from the first like 6-7 years of our lives. I mean, and well, a lot of us, there's this basically program running us.
Yeah.
Now we have to have certain kind of beliefs. We have to, because some people say we should be egoless. And I personally think, the word ego is another word that gets bantied out about there. Is not necessarily the same thing that Sigmund Freud was talking about. Yeah. I think it's the interface between our body and this 3 to 4 dimensional world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have this interface. We have to have a certain kind of belief system that, we all. So, for example, this should be on the computer. This is red, right? We both agree that this is red.
It's
but red doesn't actually exist, because it depends upon the color of the light. Actually, we could change our computer monitor and this could look green. Or we put filters, certain kind of glasses on, that the red is certain in the light that we're using with our human eyes, the reflection, absorption of light. So this basic physics doesn't really exist, but it does. Mm-hmm. We all agree that this is red. Unless you have a color blindness, then you're like, I don't know. Right. So, but I mean, this is a certain kind of belief. We have to believe that, I mean, we understand the world around us, that we live in this, we have this body, and when we live in the world, so that we all kind of agree, like that's what culture is about. We agree that there's a certain kind of way to act in public. There's a way that this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, and this is taught to us by our parents and society and so forth. Okay. But then again, where do a lot of these, so religions, for example, in the modern world, and especially in the developed world, have become less and less, and people have become much more secular. So where do we get our belief systems from?
Right.
Do we get them from our school? Do we get them from this incessant advertising that is trying to brainwash us all the time? I mean, how much of that, of our belief system, comes from this stuff around us, right?
Right.
So there, to have a system that gives us a moral compass, an ethical compass, a path with which to go, and if that helps us live our lives in a better way, whether it's following the path of Jesus Christ or following the path of Muhammad or following the path of Bob the dog. I mean, we could, if that helps us live a good life.
Yeah. You know, does it really boil? What it boils down to is, what kind of life do you have? Is it, do you describe it for yourself as a good life, right? And if it is, and there's no harm being done, then
there you go.
Then maybe that's a rule of thumb. I would like to think that when we've healed enough of our emotional and mental traumas, that we have the ability to sense that for ourselves. And when something's off, that we actually feel that. And that, for those of us who believe in spiritual teams, our guides, our angels, for those people who believe that, that we can actually turn to them for assistance. Show me some clarity around this, that we have help around us all the time, depending on what you believe.
Well, sure. And also, I also think a lot of this stuff is, personally, I think most of the spiritual systems in the world are trying to describe nature from their own cultural points of view in both time and space.
Yeah.
So whether it's the gods or God or whatever you want to call it, I mean, because the universe is immense and amazing, and we're these tiny creatures on a small planet.
Yeah.
Circling around an insignificant star in an average galaxy, and there's billions and billions and billions of galaxies. I mean, is the Earth just an electron spinning around a nucleus of an atom? I mean, really, what? So when we start grasping this stuff, it's like,
yeah.
How does that help me live my life? And so we need to have some sort of system.
Something to ground us. Right? Something to ground us. And no matter what your belief system is, mine happens to be that if I'm grounded to Grandmother Earth, I'm a lot calmer. I can actually be a lot more stable emotionally. That when I'm grounded, I can get a heck of a lot more done in a given day. So I think it depends on how you feel about it, not so much what you think about it, because you're right. Our mental mind has a finite capacity, whereas our think heart is infinite. And when we can bring those two together in a balance, I think that's the best of both worlds, no matter what path you're on.
Great. So, what do you think are warnings? So my thing is if people are taking their path, and everybody, we learn, and stuff that we need to learn at a certain time of our life can very much be very different in a different part of our lives. I mean, what I needed to learn when I was 20 years old is different when I was 40 years old, and now I'm 54 years old. Now there's certain threads that go way back to childhood that keep popping up because
they're there.
Yeah, Einstein said everything is relative, and our relatives drive us crazy. Just a joke. But it does come back to our childhood and so forth. I mean, that's a lot of modern psychology. Things do go back to our childhood experiences because
Yep.
this is how we learned.
Right. Right.
Um,
So what are the warning signs? What do you
what are
do?
the warnings? Well, I had some friends that got really into politics. And now I'm going to use politics, but it was like suddenly they're like not happy all the time.
Yeah.
And they're like pontificating endlessly. And I try to engage them in a conversation, and then they just get mean.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, are you
Grouchy, don't they?
hanging out with? Excuse me?
They get grouchy, don't they?
Well, not just grouchy. It's just like, wow, that's not. You claim that you're like want to be the benefit of humans, but as one person said, talking about another person, is like, yeah, he's really concerned about people 4,000 miles away, but he doesn't really care about the person sitting next to him. But so is this are you becoming alienated from the people around you, for example? So for cultish organizations, that's one of the definite things is trying to separate you.
Yeah.
Not that they're not that. So it's great to have a community that you can join with, but it's also great to have a community of people that are not like you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see a lot online. People are like, oh, it's good to find like-minded people to hang out with. Great. But I think it's also great to hang out with people who are not like-minded, because we realize we are all just people. And, ultimately, I think most of us have, generally speaking, agree on basic stuff. Like we talked about earlier, that we should have freedom of religion. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That people should be treated respectfully. That people should have the rules should be basically fair for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. Doesn't have to be perfect, but basically fair. That basically we shouldn't, if we can agree on these rules, that's great. So whether you're, a black guy from the inner city of Chicago, or a Native American from North Dakota, or a Japanese guy from Osaka, we don't have to agree or even believe a bunch of the same things, but if we treat each other with basic respect, which I think most people do, most people do treat others with basic respect.
Yeah,
and
I agree with you. You know why? Is because media, where we get our, I'll put it in air quotes, news from, we get to hear only about the really horrific stuff, stuff that makes headlines for them. But we very seldom do we hear about the really good stuff that's happening, right?
Sure.
So there's a certain slant to it. Yeah, and there are some really good stuff happening. Not to say that the horrific stuff we shouldn't pay attention to or act like it's not there. No, we don't need to put our heads in the sand, but we also have to realize that there's really a lot of good things happening too. We just don't necessarily hear about them from your corporate news media.
Sure. Also, by definition, news is something that's strange, not out of the ordinary. I mean, having worked in the news business, you talk about the things that are out of the ordinary because they're different. Also, the world, we actually live, shockingly, most people we live in the greatest time in human history for the average person. The average person who is born now has more opportunities for wealth, for not living in absolute, total crap poverty than ever in human history. More people have been raised out of absolutely, totally crap poverty since the 2008 economic crash. Billions of people, mostly in Asia and Africa. You don't hear about that stuff. You don't, women are in a better situation than any other time in human history. Now, again, I agree with you that there are problems in the world that need to be addressed, but there is, Billy Bob helped Granny Schlemelski across the street and carried her groceries up the steps because she needed some help and she was thankful to him. I mean, that's not breaking news. Why? Because it's normal.
Yeah.
It is normal to be kind to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we spend more time on, let's call it the 20%, that is the horrific things that are happening in the world. That's true. But there's 80% that's really good. And while we're speaking of percentages, that we have 99.98, I think it is, of our DNA that shows that two-legged humans are genetically alike. It's that 0.02 that we're different.
Right.
But that 0.02 is what we pay more attention to.
Yeah, of course. And this is part of human nature. And how do we overcome and these belief systems relative to human nature and so forth? Unfortunately, what people do with a lot of people who are in a religious group or whatever, or in politics, they want to do. Most people's motivation is good, but there are people whose motivation is definitely not good, and to control people and we need to acknowledge that and also step up to bat and challenge it too.
Yes,
so exactly. It's not. So this is all kind of a balance. I guess the thing about belief is about there is no one way is, when I catch myself, how do I say it? There's this Tibetan Buddhist, he's Canadian Tibetan Buddhist priest, and he said, imagine that your spirituality is this beautiful crystalline like wine glass, really beautiful, exquisite. Toss it on the ground. You don't get it. It's not. Once you've put it all together, you think it's all this perfect, beautiful thing. Throw it away. You don't got it because this is just like an illusion. Yeah,
and it's temporary.
And also you limit by not questioning your own self and your own and not learning from other things. We limit ourselves. Yeah. So I was looking at the time. I believe that you need to go help Julie, don't you?
Julie, I do. The Tarot Journey with Julie Hedges. She asked me if I would give her a hand with her show tonight too, because she's doing audience appreciation tonight. And you have some really interesting comments in your live chat.
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, I haven't really looked at them. I can only focus on one thing at once.
That's okay. That's all right, because I do need to slip out to be able to help Julie. I want to thank everybody for being here and listening to Paul and I. But Paul's going to do the rest of his show, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
Okay.
Thanks,
all right.
Paul.
Thanks.
Thanks for the conversation.
And have fun with Julie. Hi, Julie. Cheers, mate.
Bye.
All right. Hi, everybody. So, thanks everybody for listening. By the way, my name is Paul Crouse. So I'm Paul Crouse, and you can contact me at paulcrouse.com. That's CROUSE. So paulcrouse.com. Let's write that up. paulcrouse.com. There you go. So you can by the way, I have some specials going on for my coaching business. I'm a life coach here based in Kyoto, Japan. So between now and the end of January, I usually have free introductory sessions that are 30 minutes long. Between now and the end of January, by February 1st, my half-hour free sessions will be an hour long, and also I'll be having some. If you want to hire me as a coach, I'll be having special rates, special sales, basically special rates between reduced discounted rates if you sign up before February. If you contact me, we can talk about that more. Okay, so thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate it, and thank you very much, Neshi. Again, I appreciate everybody's comments here in the live stream, and thank you very much. Okay, we're going to be, it's just about time to stop. So thank you very much. All right, I'm not the greatest. I usually need someone to talk to. So when I'm talking to myself and the camera, it's like, all right, thank you very much. And listen, stick around for Julie Hedges' Tarot Journey show right now. Okay, thank you very much. See you later. Bye. Click end broadcast.